Hello everyone, this is Lala, and as you can see by the title of the video, this is what I am talking about. If anyone is new here, I've been making content about race, identity, and how a lot of these terms can change, and the goalposts move whenever it is convenient. When it comes to racial identities, especially and quote-unquote people of color, I always find Western Asian / Middle Eastern people, as well as Southern Europeans, to be very fascinating, since the latter is universally considered white, and the former is considered as white in some spaces and not white in other spaces, and it's very confusing. What's even more interesting is that the two groups are seen as two different racial groups to many people. But it ignores that Western Asians / Middle Easterners were and are considered white, and that's been the case for hundreds of years, and if not white, definitely Caucasian, but they are excluded due to being in the Asian continent. But many Southern Europeans are more genetically related to West Asia and the Middle East than anyone else, and it is vice versa. Since my reference point on this channel is Big Brother, I looked through the 20 or so year worth of archives to find out what fits this, and I found one. On the second All-Star season, which is Big Brother 22, Cody and Kaysar were on the season, and they immediately did not get along. Cody is someone who was recruited to be on Big Brother in 2014, though I've heard stories that his father might have watched it prior, and he didn't really know anything about it pertaining to early seasons. Due to all the pre-gaming, since it's the nature of an all-star season, and the connections that he, as well as his brother, who is also an alumni, had with many of the house guests, Cody was familiar with a lot of the house guests and watched many of their seasons, since they were recent or around the time his first season took place. Once he saw Kaysar in the cast, he didn't know anything about him other than the fact that he was on an older season and wasn't connected to the alumni. Kaysar himself started targeting Cody immediately as well, since he saw Cody and Tyler buddying up with one another within the first day or two, and was insistent that Cody needed to go. The two never gelled well with one another throughout the season. Apparently, Cody didn't like some advice that Kaysar gave him about his career, and he saw it as shade, or Kaysar making fun of him. I remember some commentary at the time with people claiming that there was racism when it comes to the interactions, and I'm looking back at it 4 years later, seeing more of the sentiment. But the thing is, they are the same race. So, how can you be racist to someone when you are the same race as them? You can be xenophobic to someone who is of a different ethnicity, but is of the same race, but that is still not racism, though xenophobia is still bad. I was debating about going over some of these comments, but you know what? Screw it. We're going to. Okay, so the first one that I'm looking at says, the person that that, sorry, this is Cody talking to Memphis, and he pretty much stated that Kaysar rubs him the wrong way, or fucking Kaysar causes him to be rubbed the wrong way, or something along the lines of those. And one comment says that he sounds a bit condescending, this being Kaysar, and yes, Kaysar has come off as condescending in all of his seasons to several of the house guests. I don't know why people are acting like this couldn't be a factor into why Cody didn't care for Kaysar or why Kaysar kind of struggles in the game. Another one says, white men bothered by intelligent, nice brown man on Big Brother. What a shocker. Okay, like I mentioned before, there's no consistent indicator as to what brown is, and legally, Kaysar is considered white in the US because Middle Easterners, including Iraqis, wanted to be called white. And I'm pretty sure if Cody took a DNA test, he would have a decent amount of Middle Eastern DNA as well. Another comment says that because he thinks he's a terrorist, no one even inference or mention Kaysar being a terrorist in the season. This isn't BB6, where Yvette pretty much said something along the lines of that to him. And if there was a comment made about him in this season in that regard, especially with the diversity quota that they've been pushing, it would have blown up. And then there's more insinuations in some of the other comments. And then another one said that Cody is racist towards powerful men who are also quote unquote alpha and especially who are POC. One, I don't know if Kaysar would have an alpha personality. Two, how can you Cody is racist towards powerful men. That's kind of a very generalized statement since powerful men can be of any race or ethnicity. Those who are POC, okay. POC is a term that I really don't like, as I've stated before, since some people who are considered quote unquote POC are also legally white, like Middle Eastern and North African and a lot of Latino people, with those groups wanting to be called white. And you're grouping anyone who isn't European together, even though a lot of these POC people have a lot more in common with Europe and European white people than other people of color. So another comment mentions that Cody has a difficulty relating to people who have different experiences than him. Cis, white, frat douche. It's a testament to how exclusionary people can be without even wanting/meaning to be, giving cauliflower benefit of the doubt here. And I honestly think this is the most accurate comment, and as we've seen in Cody regarding his 2 seasons, he sticks with the people who are a lot like him. People who are very one-dimensional in their thinking, very broy, and the women that he does work with are male identified, and because of the way he has grown up, he really just doesn't understand certain nuances that other people that aren't like him have. And it may not be intentional on his part, but he just doesn't have the depth or the vision to see through other people's perspectives. It's not the fact that he's actively racist, which some are indicating. Okay, another comment mentions that Kaysar being there threw him off, since Kaysar wasn't on Daddy Derek's list of players, pretty much referring to the pre-gaming where Derek allegedly caused Cody to contact a lot of people who would be on the cast to make an alliance, and Kaysar wasn't on there. Another comment mentioned that Kaysar is on the spectrum, and his social interactions feel different to the other Huskies, and they don't understand that what they are perceiving as fake is actually a symptom of his disorder. And this is a very interesting comment. We've seen this with Amber, who is also on the spectrum, though that was later diagnosed. And even Ian on this specific season, where his interactions with others come off differently and they don't really understand where he's coming from. So this could very well be a case, or the case with Kaysar, but a lot of people just aren't talking about this. Okay, and then someone mentions that he's the smartest player in the house. Yeah, and then others mentioned that Kaysar is a good game player. Some are calling out commenters for throwing the race card out there, which it's fair. And the others are mentioning, why are people making this a race thing? Cody was a really nice dude. Is it just possible that he just doesn't just click with Kaysar? That happens. It doesn't have to be a race thing. Maybe he's just intimidated by the dude. And yes, people don't get along. Some people, no matter how hard they try, just do not mesh or click, and that's fine. I don't think Kaysar or Cody have much in common in general. More comments stating that Kaysar isn't white, though I'm pretty sure his governmental forms state differently. And then people. This comment is very interesting, where they pretty much state that weird alpha males like Dr. Will, Bookie, Cody, etc. get intimidated by Kaysar before they say a word to him. Okay, this is very interesting now that they brought up Will and Boogie, where Dr. Will and Kaysar actually did have pre-game beef going into Big Brother 7, where they're on these online chats where they are campaigning to get into the house, and they threw some back and forth shade at one another. So when we see Will and Boogie talking about Eric and Kaysar, this is where they are coming from, because Kaysar was the fan favorite of the most recent season, and of course Will himself is just very arrogant. But of course they're making this a race thing, despite them being the same race legally. And I also think there's this infantilization that people have of Kaysar, where he is a nice dude, but he definitely has his flaws, personality wise and gameplay wise, and that does affect how he maneuvers in the game. And then people mention microaggressions, though eh, this comment really wasn't a microaggression. Saying someone rubs you the wrong way, people say that about one another all the time. Okay, now I'm going to move on to another comment where it's Enzo and Cody talking, and Enzo mentions that how Kaysar told him that he was knocked out early in the last All-Star season, and that Kaysar told him that this season he was going to play. Cody mentions that someone like that will overplay. Enzo and Cody pretty much say that they don't trust Kaysar. One comment states that it's because he's not white, so I'm pretty sure Kaysar, Enzo, who is also Italian, most likely Southern Italian, and Cody are a lot more similar than different when it comes to their racial makeup, their culture, and their Mediterranean lifestyle, and all the interactions between the two groups. One comment is sick of people throwing out race. And one comment mentions how Kaysar is pretty hard to read, which might be why they just don't gel with him. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Actually, no, there's one comment that mentions that people are desperate to point everything out as racer, and there are many reasons why people do not trust Kaysar, and that could be fair. Kaysar is an Iraqi American, and I believe he was born in Iraq before migrating here with his family sometime in his childhood. Under the US Census Bureau and law, Iraqis are considered white, meaning that Kaysar is considered white in the United States of America. This means that on all of his governmental forms, he is considered white. Since 1944, Arabs and everyone a part of the MENA community were considered white in the United States. We could take this back to the whole quote unquote Caucasoid, Negroid, Mongoloid argument where Iraqis and everyone in the Middle Eastern North African group are and were always considered Caucasoids. When you look at their history regarding migration, trade, and accessibility within Europe over the centuries and millennia, it makes sense. In addition to that, more they are more genetically related to Europeans than anyone else, and they are clustered with them on PCA graphs, which is principal component analysis charts. Cody is an Italian American, and most Italians who migrated to North America in general are Southern Italian instead of Northern Italian, where a lot of the Northern Italians migrated to South America. And a lot of the Southern Italians migrated to the Americas because the economy was going downhill in their area, and a lot more of the financial benefits were in Northern Europe, so they migrated to the Americas. There is a distinction between Northern Italy and Southern Italy regarding their genetic makeup, where the latter has Western Asian and Northern African lineage and ancestry, and admixture, where the former has more Germanic lineage and admixture. I didn't know what type of Southern Italians the Calafioris were at first until I saw Polly mention that they're Sicilian, and Sicilians have even more admixture from West Asia and North Africa than other Southern Italians, since they are an island and they're literally at the most southern point of the country. So I found a chart regarding several Eurasian groups of people and the admixtures that they all have, and I found two that pretty much fits the examples that I'm referring to, i.e. Kaysar and Cody. One of the admixtures is from a group called Assyrians, which was an ancient group in what is currently known as Iraq. So this perfectly fits Kaysar because he is an Iraqi. And the second group are Sicilians, which is what Cody is, as we've already discussed. So if you look at these two charts, you see some differences and some similarities. I'm going to get the differences out of the way earlier. The major difference I see between them is that the Assyrians have a small drop of South Asian DNA, and I'm assuming this is from the Iranians who have minor South Asian DNA due to Iran being next to South Asia and Iraq being next to Iran. So it makes sense. And Sicilians have a bit of North European DNA. Just based off of what I know about the admixture in Italy, Northern Italians have a lot more Northern European DNA, and this mainly comes from the French, since Southern France is right above Northern Italy. And of course, the further south you go in Italy, the less of that Northern European DNA that you have, which is why they have a bit. But outside of that, there are a lot of similarities. So, the first similarity that I notice is that both groups share West Asian DNA, where Assyrians have about 50% of West Asian DNA, and Sicilians have about 30% West Asian DNA from what I see. But what's interesting is that South Italian Sicilians have a bit of Northwest African DNA. So this would be presumably Egypt and Libya and Tunisia, which makes sense because they're on the western side of North Africa. Tunisia is literally right below Sicily, so it all makes sense. Both of them have South European DNA, where Sicilians have about 40% indigenous South European DNA, which makes sense since they're in Southern Europe, while Assyrians have about 20% of that South European DNA. And this makes sense because, of course, there's a lot of travel from Greece, Italy, the islands that are currently now associated with those two countries, moving through the Levant and eventually into Assyria. So that's why they have that admixture there. And the other components that they have in common is Southwest Asian DNA. So this would be the Arabian Peninsula, where it looks like Assyrians have about 20 to 25% of that, which makes sense due to location wise. And Sicilians have maybe 20% of that at most. And yeah, so overall, they're really not that different genetically. And due to their close proximity, not only to one another, but due to other neighboring countries, they would have a lot of similarities admixture-wise. Even when you look at them phenotypically side by side, there really isn't much difference. Just from this picture, they have the same nose, and I remember Cody complaining on the feed, and I think it made it on the episodes where he was complaining about his nose. And he has a lot more of an Arabid nose, which is a more hooked nose, and he complained about not liking the hook and the bump on his nose, and that shows the closer admixture to the Middle Eastern and the North Africans that a lot of Southern Italians have. Kaysar also has that feature. And even if you look at their skin textures, it's really not that different. Cody's already a tanned white man, so he gets color more than a lot of other white people. And Kaysar is a bit darker than Cody, but it's really not that much of a difference. And he's not much darker than him at all. So phenotypically, they are very similar. So you can't even use that as an indicator to state that they are so different to the point where they're two completely different races. And what I have here is a collage of people who are of Middle Eastern, North African, and South European descent, and you literally cannot tell them apart at all, which shows that they are very similar racially, and it makes sense because they are all Mediterranean countries. They're in countries that have very similar temperatures, and all of these areas have had so much migration and mixing throughout literally millennia at this point. So it makes sense that they would all look similar. So you can't really say that Southern Europeans and Middle Eastern people specifically are different when it comes to race because race is primarily based on phenotype. And if they have the same phenotype and they also have a lot of the same admixtures, how are they different racially? Right? It really makes no sense.
There has been so much migration between people in these two areas and in the area between Italy and Iraq, specifically the Levant, Greece, Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey, Mediterranean islands, and even North Africa, where the cultural and genetic pool gets merged together, and there will be some specifics. You can even see it in the agriculture of some of these places and the food of some of these places, as how areas within this cluster ended up influencing one another. So it makes sense why they are like this. So, if they are closely related to one another, have the same phenotype on average, and are a part of the same race, why are they treated differently? Honestly, I think the main reason has to do with religion. The main religion in not only Italy but in Europe overall is Christianity. And I'm not even going to get into the different branches of the religion in or that specific religion in this video. But it is not only just put on a pedestal in Europe, but in the Western world as well. Judaism has a heavier presence in Europe, though of course there's a lot of anti-Semitism, but their presence isn't a shocker. But Islam really isn't a strong presence in Europe, so it's an easy way to quote-unquote other people and to make them quote-unquote less white. So, is discriminating someone based on religion racism? No. People can be of the same race and discriminate based on religion, and it isn't racism because it doesn't involve race. Though you can be of a different race and religion as well. But religion in itself doesn't necessarily involve race. But it is used as a way to quote-unquote other in the quote-unquote exclusivity of what Caucasian or white is. Islam is a religion that is heavily associated with Asia or Africa, so while there really isn't a racial pacifier or qualifier for a religion, people use stuff like this to put premonitions and use them to whatever fits their convenience. I also have to bring up the quote-unquote they are in Asia, so they are racially Asian argument. One, I think we all know that when someone is referring to Asian on racial grounds, they are generally referring to what is referred to as quote-unquote Mongoloid or even quote-unquote Vedoid, where the former term is referred to East Asians, Southeast Asians, and some South Asians like Nepalese and Bhutanian people, while the latter refers to a lot of the islanders in the Pacific and some Southeast as well as South Asians who are mixed with it. It makes sense since Middle Easterners are more related to Europeans than anyone else, so they wouldn't have those components that would racially make them Mongoloid or Vedoid, and they have components that racially makes them white. It's like the talking point of North Africans being African by continent and geographic location, but they even distance themselves from that term since everyone knows that Africans is racially referred to black people of sub-Saharan ancestry, and North Africa is above the Sahara. Borders are not visibly drawn on a line, so using the argument of borders to determine a race or not is ridiculous. And it's even worse because there's a stronger presence amongst borders in relation to nations compared to continental borders, especially between Europe and Asia. And when you look at migration patterns and ancestry history, you have to look at the location of these areas and what is around it. In the Middle East, especially in areas like the Levant, Anatolia, or even Mesopotamia, they are very close to southern Europe. So it makes sense that they would genetically be more related to them than most of Asia. And it would also make sense just due to the history between the area. If I am remembering this correctly, the entire point of Asia that was created was due to the relation of what is currently known as Greece and Turkey, where the ancient Greeks and even the Romans called what is now known as Turkey as quote-unquote Asia Minor. And this was the first term where Asia was used as an othering tactic, despite both sides acknowledging the similarities that they do have. Overall, it just shows how arbitrary certain constructs are and how the goalposts are consistently moved based on what is convenient, whether borders are legitimized in actuality than people like to claim, in addition to all the other nuances, like religion and some of the isms that I've mentioned in the past. Whether legal recognition adds up to the lived experience, or whether it does, is an interesting thing, since people of Middle Eastern ancestry and lineage in America fought to be considered white, and they even used Jesus as an example, they used the whole Caucasoid thing as an example, and they got their wish. But we know that they feel like they don't have the lived experience, partially due to their religion, and of course the events of 9/11 and Orientalism, which is a whole nother thing that we can get into. If DNA and ancestry matter more than phenotype, matters just as much or matters as little as phenotype, what makes one more superior than the other, and why is there such huge differences? In general, I just wanted to make this little quick video on this topic, and I've already addressed the whole brown thing in another video, where even that is a term that I don't like, since it groups a lot of people from different ethnic, cultural, racial, geographic areas that have absolutely nothing to do with one another. Anyways, I'll be back with another video soon, and thank you for watching. Take care! So, I found a few Reddit posts about this manner regarding Middle Eastern North African people being white or not, and the relations to Southern Europe that I was going to include here, but the video would be way too long, and I wanted to break down some of the comments. So I might make a part 2 to this video, and if that's the case, expect it soon. Take care!